Welcome everybody to the Baltcast. We are live here in Los Angeles, and we have a very special event that we are actually streaming live on YouTube and on Facebook to everybody to see. So we have a special guest from Vilnius University who came into town, who's actually going to be doing the story of BAFL. And we have many guests that will be joining us today to talk about the history of BAFL, what it was like in the past, and what we're working on now, and what we're looking forward to the future. So if you're joining us live, you can ask as many questions in there. We'll get to it as we can in accordance to. So thank you for watching. And if you're watching the replay of this, thank you for watching again. So I wanted to introduce Urte. So Urte, tell us why you're here and just give us a synopsis of what you're here for.
Yes, of course. So hi everyone, my name is Urte. I'm a first-year master's student at Vilnius University, Faculty of History. During my studies, I became interested in the Lithuanian diaspora, especially those living in America. Your organization has done a tremendous work, and we will be forever grateful. You have played a significant role in ensuring that we now have 3 independent Baltic states. Currently at the university, we are studying the activities of Lithuanian Americans across the Atlantic. While we have several modules focused on your history and achievements, I believe the full story of the diaspora has not yet to be fully uncovered. One major obstacle has been the limited access to primary sources in Lithuania. I'm happy to share that I have archived a significant portion of these materials, and I hope that upcoming books and studies will soon reveal the true depth of your impact. To further the strength our relationship and ensure your legacy remains vibrant, I would like to propose several initiatives for closer cooperation. So the first one probably could be the digital integration. We could collaborate on creating a shared digital platform or database. This would allow students in Lithuania and BAFL members to exchange documents, photographs, testimonies, making history accessible to all. Also, it would be amazing to do live testimonies. For example, like organizing joint webinars or seminars between BAFL members and university students would provide invaluable living history that textbooks simply cannot capture. And BAFL is a vital bridge connecting our past struggle for freedom with today's geopolitical challenges. Maintaining active ties and exchanging information is crucial to keeping your work relevant for the future generations. It is vital for students to know that the efforts of Baltic citizens remain active and continue to serve our collective well-being. I'm delighted to have the opportunity to visit you and experience this life at first hand. And being here, your work takes on a different perspective. One can truly see the immense effort put in, and I'm committed to ensuring that it was well documented, preserved, and celebrated. These archived documents will be distributed to institutions located in Lithuania, such as Pavlovskis Library. I'm so sorry, or my of the Lithuanian Academy of Science, of course, the Vilnius University Central Library, the Library of the Faculty of History, the Office of the Chief Archivist of Lithuania, Central State Archives, the Lithuanian Special Archives, and the Genocide and Resistance Research Center of Lithuania. As I mentioned, these sources will be accessible to the public and, most importantly, to students and historians who will give meaning to your work through their books. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you. Absolutely. Absolutely. Just before you move to the side for a second, just a little bit about yourself. So, what is your perspective of things? Because I believe you were born after freedom. So what I guess now we have different generation as far as the context, as far as experiences. So what do you see as far as what's your perspective as far as someone from Lithuania?
Yes. So probably we are not talking much about your work here in America, which you did in the Cold War years. Yes. And yes, of course, as I mentioned, we have a few models where we are talking about the Americans and their organizations, which ones were created here in America, but not much. I think that we need to do something more about this. And I think it's really interesting and it's super important what you did in here, yes, in those Cold War years. And it's super important for the Lithuanians in Lithuania and for our history. And that's why I want to archive everything so we could write some books and do the researches on your work and just publicate it, and so everyone could see it and everyone could know your history.
Absolutely. Thank you
Thank you
so
so
much. And so this is why this is really important for us to document the history of BAFL and of the activities from what we did on this side of the Atlantic region. And we have we're just doing everything we can so that everybody understands all the work that we did on this side. Before we get onto our panel, what I wanted to do is bring on Rima Talat-Kelpsa, and she's in Chicago. She works with us as part of Blue Yellow USA. We've been working together. I know that we want the past and present future. But being that she's been waiting for us for about an hour to start the live presentation, we want to make sure that she gets her time now, and then we can focus on there. So, Oshra, thank you for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, you were on the board of directors for BAFL, and Rima, your daughter, was also board of directors.
Yes.
And so a couple things that I want to talk about is just your Blue Yellow, your cooperation working with BAFL as two different organizations, your experience as far as what you perceive BAFL, and also Rima's account, because she just came back from Ukraine as a medic, and she was also at the same time a member of our board of directors. So sure. If you could,
Absolutely. I think here all three things work together: past, present, and future. A little bit about my family. My family are refugees from Lithuania that came to the States to work in order to help the family that remained there and was in the Gulag. So we have two sides of the Atlantic that are involved in Lithuanian history. They were involved in the DP camps, taking care of people there, and they were involved in helping people to come over to the States. It was a very difficult time during that time. And then they became involved in the different community efforts here that were started to regain Lithuanian independence, various efforts. And BAFL was started around that time. So both parallel and participating in some of the activities, as I've been uncovering in many documents my family left behind that were not looked at until now after my mother's death. One of the things we do have is we've got some of her history on video. She was 100 when she died in 2024, turning 101. So she lived through it all from beginning to end, through the history of a young Lithuania, through the history of an occupied Lithuania, through the family being split up, deported, and killed and murdered, tortured and interrogated, through the DP times, the refugee times, all the way into the United States and the efforts that were taking place here. I became involved as a youngster with the dance groups and with different activities until I went to Germany for medical school. And there, living in West Berlin, it became very clear to me what the actual essence of Russian occupation meant. You have to live in a place to actually feel it on your own skin. So I lived there for some time. I started a family. We came back to the States in the early, in the late 1990s. And there my children became involved as well. And Rima, one of my two kids, was extremely involved. She was involved in folk dancing and all the normal efforts, but she, as a political science and international relations major and a devotee of Model UN at the time, became involved on the political side all the way through to her adulthood, and thus coming to BAFL as a member of the board and other Lithuanian organizations, and also beginning work on a film, a documentary about nonviolent independence and how it related to Lithuania. Through that, we have a large number of raw data interviews with different Lithuanians here and abroad that were involved in the movement towards the independence of Lithuania. And some of that material is, as I look at it again with Jonas Mekas and others, really key to what you're discussing now and to what Urte is trying to achieve. As we became involved, we realized that despite NATO and all of the promises we've been given, Lithuania still has to worry about and to shore up any efforts towards its defense, the defense of its independence. BAFL is one of those organizations that has carried it through historically from 1965 onwards to this day, fighting for legislation that will protect Lithuania in the national interests of the United States, of course. So as a board member, I was able to vote on some things. I was much more active prior to 2022 when, well, actually, we can say that we started in 2014. We worked with Jonas Omen of Blue Yellow Lithuania until 2019, when we founded Blue Yellow USA and began working in Ukraine on the ground from that point onward. Rima was a part of that effort. She was managing director of our organization until she came to me one day and said, this is not enough. Giving out equipment, giving out goods is not enough. I have to be directly participating in the effort. So she became a medic and was a volunteer medic for a number of organizations until she came one day and she said, that's not enough. I'm going to enlist in the Ukrainian armed forces. So she is currently a member of the Ukrainian armed forces. She's here on short leave. I apologize that she couldn't be here today. Her time has been involved in various, she's been talking everywhere, but her main reason for coming here was to participate in the Special Operations Medical Association conference, where she presented a lot of the medical advances in tactical medicine are being made in Ukraine. Those are extremely important, and others want to hear about it, American forces and other international forces. So she was at the conference speaking. She'll be back in Chicago sometime this weekend. So it's been a long path, but the reason for us being involved in Ukraine and for her being there is really clear to us. If Ukraine loses, Lithuania stands a great chance of being threatened by Russia with an occupation again. If Ukraine wins, then that's prevented. Maybe Russian boots will not enter onto Lithuanian soil again. This was her primary motivation for going to Ukraine at all. It was, if I go and do my part, then Lithuania stands a chance to be in a way, I'm defending Lithuania, preventing it from being occupied again. She's probably the only Lithuanian American currently in the Ukrainian armed forces. There are Lithuanians from Lithuania there. I've met some in our work that we do on the ground. And in fact, one of the medical directors, a doctor, heads up the medical section of one of the units in the Ukrainian armed forces. Not her unit, but one of the other units. So it's for us directly important. And we work with BAFL not only on some of the efforts that they are making with Ukraine and Ukrainian organizations in the States, but on the efforts they're making towards legislation being passed that's key and important to us. But it's not a selfish proposition. It's important to us because it's also going to be important to the United States and its national security. So that's the history. If you have any questions, let me know. I do want to just state here that I want to thank Conrad for inviting me, and I want to thank a friend of mine who's been working with BAFL for a long time, Ann Smith, and all of the efforts that she makes in this respect.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I guess while people are, thinking of questions to ask you from the live studio or from the live audience, I guess my question to you, Osha, is what has BAFL, done as far as collaborations with Blue Yellow? If you can give some examples of how we work together.
Well, so we share events, of course, and we try to attend each other's events. We have members of our board that are able to speak on BAFL's board about Lithuania and the interests of the United States. Kęstas Aidukonis, a retired lieutenant colonel who was in Vietnam and worked with the United States military for decades and with Lithuania as well. So he is able to speak on your panels and talk about the different subjects that are key militarily and economically to both Lithuania and the United States. We've got other members of the board. Our board consists of Lithuanian and Ukrainian members and one American member. Well, Ukrainian and Lithuanian Americans. We have worked with you on different legislation. At times we get materials from you and we opine on them, or we talk to you about what our opinion is being on the ground and so on in Lithuania. And you have we've been at different events together where we have cooperated, and you've represented us at our booths and so on. So it's a very friendly, very I think productive collaboration, and we actually hope to increase that. We have talked about BAFL when we've been at the Ukraine Action Summits. There have been 8. We've done nearly 60% of those. I think we've only not been at 2 of them, and we're going to go back in September, and we hope to work with BAFL on that one as well.
Thank you, Osha. I appreciate you, holding on to into the back, the backstage while we were setting up. So, and I appreciate, the collaboration, and we look forward to more collaboration with Blue Yellow in any way we can. So yes. Just, final 1, minute, message.
We need organizations like BAFL to continue the work they're doing, but we need much more activity from the audience, I would say, from people that are not yet involved. We need them to get involved, to help in any way they can. They can go to BAFL's website. They can look at what events are coming, what actions they're taking, very important call to actions, and participate in those, and realize that the more that they do, the more we can achieve as organizations to get to the goals that we're working towards.
Absolutely. Thank you, Osha. Thank you for joining us, and say hello to Rima from all of us. Wish her well.
She says hello, and she's an amazing person. She's my personal hero, and she's just working really hard but she says hello, and she hopes that she can be on the next panel.
Absolutely. Did you have a question, Tony?
Well, just a mention of the fact that as of the latest information from Pew Institute, which is looking at the data, support of Americans for victory in Vietnam, still a majority of Americans support complete victory in Ukraine.
Okay, did you
Yes.
hear that? Okay.
Yes, that's true. The population of the United States is very pro-Ukraine. It's the upper echelons of government that seem to be having some doubts or whatever. But those are the ones that we need to convince with our support that the support is valuable, it is needed, and it is necessary also to the United States' own national interests.
Absolutely. And I believe it's just a small group of people that are just really, 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 really loud.
Mhm.
So,
Yes.
So, Osha, thank you again, and we look forward to working together with Blue Yellow, and absolutely, so stand with Ukraine and defend the Baltics.
Thank you for having me, Conrad, and thank you for being there as BAFL.
Thank you. Okay, so next, how are we conducting this?
Well, let's get back to the history.
Back to the history of BAFL. Okay, so I'm going to bring on to the panel with you. So some of our founding members and founding leadership that have made some major, milestones for Baltic American Freedom League. We have Tony Mazeika, the founding president of BAFL. We have Valdis Pavlovskis and Jok Trayman. And with us is also Angele and Nelsas and Lina Duseviciene from Vilnius University. So everybody is all on here to discuss as far as BAFL's past that we've had. So I guess between Valdis and Tony, question is, how did it come to this point in 1981? What was leading up to it?
I'm sure that Val is going to talk about it as well. But how we got involved at that point was because of the fact that the USS Valdis was very active in the Republican Party here in California and had access to the committee that was working to elect President Reagan. And as we know from history, Reagan was elected as president, but Valdis was able to maintain contacts with the two major marketing companies working for the President of the United States, and through their efforts, the same marketing company that was used to elect President Reagan was a company that helped the Baltic American Freedom League get started in the marketing campaign, looking for the the interests of the Baltic nations and to how to project that across the United States.
Wonderful.
I can turn it over to if Al wants to say anything about that, but that is the earliest moment when BAFL got started with the committee, with the general achievement basically was going to be to do everything possible to assist the restoration of the Baltic nations, and it was primarily geared towards Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C., well, we're talking about Congress of the United States and also the executive office of the President in the United States.
Just okay, Val.
Valdis is here today to listen, but he's not going to be able to share.
Okay. Gotcha. All right. Yeah, we're shuffling chairs around right now.
But if you want to sit here, Hunter.
No, you stay there.
Okay.
Okay. Just want to make sure people online can.
Valdis was one of the presidents, very essential at that time with his wisdom, his planning, and his stoic stance and things that he believed in. He was in and out, both of us shared the same road at times. We kind of argued about certain things, but always found a way to come to the same conclusions, and the goal of it was to really how much more could we achieve for the Baltic states. This was a great undertaking. We were mostly self-funded. We were mostly volunteers, and yet, as we look back at the history of BAFL, I think we were very instrumental in accomplishing things bigger than ourselves. For example, it was our bravery, I think, to go against the Soviet Union and during the Olympics to somehow show the world what Soviet was like. The poster that they showed the three Baltic states as young men on the stand, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia in chase, and a big heading, Olympics Soviet style. And journalists from around the world and politicians looked at it. So we finally got them so frustrated that they gathered their Olympians to the ship and went back to the Soviet Union. So to this day, the world was truly, I think, riveted to this reminder and illumination of the Soviet Union and its life. It took a lot of gumption, I think, to pull this off for a small group of people here in Los Angeles. Maybe we will be doing something this time around when we have the Olympics here in Los Angeles.
That's good. We'll save that towards the end. Future. Then you.
Val, please, yeah.
He was a tough president.
About me. I think half of what we would be great, we spent the time, we spent money, people, patriots, never the Republican or be there, be there. Better people. Tony and cool people justice stuff like legal papers. So I find way as and I whenever to speak with the mouth, but on heart, ear, yes, on.
Yeah, and we understand everything. Don't worry.
Yeah, there was a lot of heart. I'm Lina Mazeika. I'm one of the founders of Baltic American Freedom League. Tony, myself, and Valdis were part of the originals who established the group. And what is amazing today, when you look back 4.5 decades, because it is now 45 years since BAFL has been on the field, and as Val had so well said through his heart, his ears, his total dedication, that there were many roles that were taken after we all were giving our all here in the West to help be a voice for the Baltic countries. Years ago, Otto von Habsburg told Baltic American Freedom League in the first days that we will see freedom in Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia when we see dishes, electronic dishes on every large building, and that the Soviets can no longer silence the freedom and aspirations of the Baltics. And that was totally amazing. In the very beginning, when BAFL started, the Hanford Company went and did research, and it was, well, the State Department is waiting for all of these diplomats to die out, that this is going to become normalized with the Soviet Union. And we asked the Hanford Company, okay, so give us a plan. Give us a 12-point plan to run on how to change this in Washington, D.C. And so we were the upstarts. We were the organizers of something new. And it was also from the point of view that we're American citizens and the government, we don't work for the government. The government works for us. And this is what we want you to do for us. And so it became the annual human rights conferences that we had. It became demonstrations. It became issues that were very, very hard for our ethnic communities to actually say, okay, we really want to see our brethren at the Los Angeles Olympics, but we don't necessarily want them to be wearing Soviet uniforms. We want the flags to be flying, but we don't necessarily want the flags to be the Soviet flags. That we want the tricolors, the bicolors. You know, we want the Baltic colors to be flying. And thanks be to people within our community. This is all volunteer. Nobody paid anybody for anything except for the first plan with the Hanford Company and Leslie Dutton, who was the spearhead. Who now these days we have Ann Smith as our spearhead. Leslie Dutton was our spearhead at that point in time. And then we did have people who would break from their workday, would drive to Los Angeles, 100 miles round trip, just to demonstrate, just to speak to all of the newsmakers, and we would have them in our living rooms. We would have them, and we would explain what is the Baltic non-recognition policy. Why is it important? Why do these people not want to be living in paradise for the Soviet Union, and why they want the hard work of freedom? Because democracy and freedom is one of those things that you have to work for, and you have to give of yourself. And so all of these people that are sitting on the panel here have put in a tremendous amount of work over 4.5 decades, almost a half a century now. And the work continues, and the next generation is now going to be passed the baton to continue that work that we need to have done. And for people in the Baltic countries of Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, that all of the people in these countries would be able to understand what was done out here. what kind of sacrifices were made out here. And they live in a bad neighborhood. You know, we have the bear to the east. And that bear does show its teeth and show its nails, and it is inhuman right now of what's going on in Ukraine. The children that are being kidnapped, the men, women, and children who are being destroyed as civilians, the human rights that are being totally destroyed. So with that said, Baltic American Freedom League has shown the way for the Baltic countries, but our work is just beginning for the entire region and the entire area as well. And for our brethren in Ukraine, we were once a huge empire, and we got along with each other. We had a little skirmishes here and there, but you know, we still got along. And the main thing is that these countries are so valuable, not only for Europe, but for the entire world and for the United States, as being the vanguard of freedom in that area, because the freedom for the Baltic states is now the freedom for the rest of the world as well. And we need our neighbors to be friendly and to be whole and to be wholesome. And so, as a member of Baltic American Freedom League, looking back on 4.5 decades, it's amazing the road that we've taken. And we even challenged, we have Jaap Tryman who led the challenge during the Olympics when the Baltic folk dancers were discriminated against.
Yeah, and I think I'd like to pivot to that, just to the 1984 everything. So I guess with Tony and Jaap, tell us about the activities of the 1984 ban the Soviets from the Olympics.
Well, there's two parts of that. One part of that was the attempt that was made by the Los Angeles area community, Baltic community, to participate in the actual ceremonies in Los Angeles at that time, and the problems that occurred because automatically the Soviet Union demanded that they not appear there, not to give them any kind of publicity. That was extremely important. And the other part of it was that we had organized an ad hoc committee from BAFL working with other activist groups in Los Angeles, including the Korean community and some evangelical groups, basically working together, first of all, to protest the shooting of KAL 007 plane that was shot over Pacific Ocean close to the Soviet border. Sakhalin Islands, Americans, as well as one U.S. congressman was killed by the Russians shooting down an airline. So what happened was, and this gets to be a very interesting situation, we, with our BAFL ad hoc committee group, working with these other groups of Americans, started to organize a campaign demanding, number one, that there be restitution made by the Soviet Union for the killing of American citizens. And number two, we then started to organize a campaign to ban the Soviets from coming to the 1984 Olympics. That caught fire on an international basis. The press and the media jumped at this opportunity. They loved it, and so did we, because our message across was basically, every time we spoke about the fact that the Baltic countries were annexed and occupied illegally by the Soviet Union since World War II. And our idea was that only an independent Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia should appear at the Olympics. It was very successful, and we have all kinds of recordings and TV interviews that we've been able to record, made available to the University of Vilnius if they want those, the records, but that was part of what we did in those times.
But I'm going to segue with that, Tony, because one thing that you're not mentioning is that what happened was the press and the media got rather interested when this became not a dog bites man story, because those are, who cares? But it was a man bites dog story, okay? And this was unusual, so Ted Koppel on Nightline,
ABC TV.
ABC TV nationwide, put together a debate. And it was Tony Mazeika from Baltic American Freedom League. It was Bruce Jenner, who is now Caitlyn Jenner, who was a decathlete gold medalist. And so what happened was he represented the athletes that would be, you know, if the Soviets wouldn't come, what would it be like? And there was Peter Uberoth, who was in charge of all of the Los Angeles Olympics, okay? And it was a very successful Olympics because he was a businessman and he set it up really nicely. And so at that point in time, it was rather interesting because over at the ABC studios, I was in the green room with Mrs. Uberoth, who was knitting away, and I had a little basket that contained Conrad because he had just been born 2 weeks before. So this entire
It's a family thing.
idea, you know, was going on, and then we got home, and then afterwards, press and media called and called and called and called from Australia, from Japan, from Finland, from France, from every country that was going to be coming to the LA Olympics, okay? And so what they would do is they would come into our living room and Tony would start from the history of the Baltic states, the freedom of the Baltic states, the non-recognition policy. There would be an education of all of these journalists throughout the world. And so when finally, and there was a whole year program that was put together, and this thing built until in May, get a phone call. Orange County Register, some kids aren't coming to the Olympics. Can you react? And I said, what? You're kidding. And the night before, Gromov from Moscow, who was in charge of all of the athletes from the Soviet Union, you know, they made requests like, oh, well, why don't you take these BAFL people and take them into Arizona, deport them to Arizona. And they said, I'm sorry, but America doesn't do that kind of thing. And then what happened was they said, oh, Voice of America can't cover the Olympics because if anybody, you know, did that or anything like that, they didn't want any kind of coverage. And Mr. Reagan says, I'm sorry, but you're coming to America and Voice of America is going to be covering it, okay? And then there was a whole program that was going on, and it was absolutely incredible, and our entire community was involved. We had the free Olympiad for all those athletes who were not able to participate. Then we, you know, carried the voice that they are being suppressed and they cannot come to the Olympics because of Moscow, that kind of thing. So this was absolutely an incredible man bites dog story that historically changed. This is 1984, 2 years before Chernobyl. And so everything was almost as if it was in God's hands. And then we would have people going to Washington. Angele spent a lot of time in Washington, D.C. Valdis spent a lot of time. Tony as well. We had, and with the Olympics, and this is one thing that our dear counselor can tell us about, but they discriminated against the Balts based upon our ethnic origin. And so we asked our dear greatest advocate, Jack Tryman, this is unfair.
My turn? Nice handoff. The Olympics in 1984, in part, we have to tie it into the 1981 Olympics, when President Carter decided that the Americans would not participate because of the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. And from that point on, there was always speculation whether or not the Soviets would retaliate by not coming to the Olympics. Our suspicion is that they were willing to, but given the work that BAFL was doing, I think that solidified their decision not to come in 1994. They gave as excuses that their security couldn't be, as Nina mentioned, security couldn't be guaranteed. And in part, I think they were worried about it. But until the very last minute, I think Peter Uberroth, the president of the Olympic Organizing Committee, was hoping that the Soviets would come. What happened was that the Estonian, Latvian, Lithuanian local folk dance groups were originally asked to apply to participate in the opening ceremony's international parade. The parade consisted of all the different ethnic communities in Southern California. And when the dance groups applied, they didn't hear anything. And then one of the applicants, I don't remember which country, went to personally inquire what was going on.
I think Jan's Brauts.
It may have been Jan's Brauts, it may have been Robert Anderson, or both. But the response that they got was kind of an off-the-record comment that, oh, you guys are too political. We can't have you. So the dance groups were upset. They weren't sure what to do. They came to me for legal advice. I wrote letters to the National Olympic Committee and got a real nasty reply. I mean, it was obnoxious even by today's terms.
That's saying a lot.
Then we talked about it, and I represented, or my firm represented, the three dance groups in a lawsuit against the LA Olympic Organizing Committee. Also named was the International Olympic Committee and the National American Olympic Committees. The basis for the lawsuit was that there was discrimination based on national origin. There was a state action, the state law, the Unruh Act, that prohibits discrimination based on a whole series of factors, and one of them is national origin. We filed the lawsuit. My partner was delighted because all the free stuff that I've been doing and times I've been spending, BAFL was backing this up by actually paying us. We weren't charging full fare, but my partner was satisfied that we were getting something for once. But we filed a lawsuit, and then I won't go into the details of it. If anybody's interested, I still have to file. But since there was no argument about what the facts were, we filed joint motions for summary judgment saying, Judge, here are the facts. This is why each one of us would argue the law as to why the law supported us. We lost at the trial level. because essentially because the court felt that this was a political question that the court should not address, thereby just sidestepping having to decide whether there was discrimination. We took it up on appeal. By the time we took it up on appeal, the Olympics were over. But we had a three-panel judiciary at the appellate level, and one of them was actually Armenian, but we lost there too on the same grounds. It's a political question. At that point, the Olympics were over. We had gotten our point across, and the case was settled. And when I say we got our point across, what I mean is that we were able to publicize the situation for the Baltic states. Vilnius, at the time, the largest Spanish language newspaper in America, carried a front page story on us. The LA Herald Examiner, which existed at that time, gave us a good editorial. I got letters of support from the Human Rights Commission in Washington, D.C. And as I mentioned to you, I got telephone calls from Japan, with Japanese reporters asking about the status of the lawsuit. And then when I asked them about why we appreciated the interest, but why are you interested? I was told that in the Japanese mind, the situation with Baltic states equated with the situation of the Japanese islands that the Soviet Union took over during the last days of World War II. So there were additional communications like that. As a matter of fact, one of the funnier things for me personally was that when we went in for the initial hearing on the summary judgment motion, the press came out for it, local TV stations, and for the KTTV, I think it was Channel 11, the reporter who came out was Tule, an Estonian. And, before I went into the courtroom, we were talking in Estonian, talking about the case. And Tia can't remember this anymore. I talked to her about it. But I thought it was kind of, I don't know, I enjoyed that. But the point is that what I've mentioned is just a few of the examples of the publicity we got. And we were able to carry the story of the Baltic states out on a national and international level because of that lawsuit. So the way I put it in my book, Carried by a Magic Band, it talks about BAFL and the lawsuit and all that to get my plug in. But what I talked about there, and I lost my train of thought just by getting the book mention in there.
It was ultimately a big win on a worldwide basis. We never received such worldwide publicity at that point in history. Favorable coverage by the press and media worldwide. So the important thing to remember here is that he's talking about the challenge to get our dance groups participating at the Olympics. But in between that time, there was a period of time when the Soviet Union was putting full pressure on the administration and the Reagan administration that those of us that were involved with these demonstrations be held, and stopped in terms of what we were doing because it was looked upon as being a threat to the Soviet Union.
Yeah, what I was gonna say was that out of the, all the participants in the lawsuit, it was a victory for the Baltic states and BAFL in the support. It was a victory for my law firm because we didn't lose money. And the only ones that lost, unfortunately, were the three Baltic dance groups. Which at this point, I am talking with the city of LA, so far without too much success, but suggesting to them that, hey, look what you guys did to us in '84, in 26, or in 28.
Yeah.
How about doing something to
Special.
kind of compensate for it? And a couple of years ago, I talked to a member of the Olympic Committee who was kind of receptive to the idea. So far, I haven't gotten any positive feedback from the city, but we've still got a couple of years to go. So we may be able to generate some advantage now from the loss then.
Well, they were sensitized to the Baltic dancers because David, I forget his last name, the producer of the opening games, Wolper, yes, David Wolper. He produced also the under the Reagan administration. They had the Olympic, not the Olympic plane, but the anniversary of the Statue of Liberty, and they had redone the plane in there. And there was a big ceremony in the New York, New Jersey area celebrating all of the nations that had come under the flame of the
Liberty.
Lady Liberty. And what was interesting was that David put the Baltic dancers, Lithuanians, Latvians, and Estonians around Reagan and Nancy Reagan. And I knew at that point that was the win, that is the future. And right now, a lot of questions have been asked of us at the BAFL as far as, okay, the 28 Olympics are coming. What are you going to do next? So maybe with this sensitivity and the fact of the matter that there is no more Soviet Union, and for the matter that Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia are fantastic Baltic states, that we could probably have local Balts here participate in the Olympics in some way, shape, or form with our brethren who are going to be marching in with their own flags. Finally, because now we're winning. At the next Olympics, we will have the tricolors of Lithuania and Estonia and the dual colors of Latvia.
However, past is prologue, because what's going on now, I mean, our fear, I mean, newscasters are talking about, Russia, who knows they can't win the war in Ukraine, may sidetrack over and, let's just go invade the Balts. And there's talk about it, certainly when we're going to talk about present and future, we're going to
Absolutely.
talk about that.
Absolutely.
But it could come up in 2 years that's the problem again. Oops, a little too political.
Then we re-engage our past playbook, because that's a effective playbook that we used in the past. And
One last comment on the '84 Olympics. The legal argument that the Olympic Organizing Committee used was it's a political issue, but the other one that they used was that the Baltic states didn't exist. They didn't have a National Olympic Committee. They were non-entities. But I happened to be at the opening ceremony my dad won the lottery to get tickets. So I was there watching the international parade and getting really irritated because they had ethnic groups there. They didn't have nations.
Yeah, of course.
There were Native Americans there. There were the local, Mexican mariachi players. It made the whole argument about, well, they don't exist, they don't have a state, completely irrelevant. But anyway, I still get irritated.
At that time, member was also John Klatch, and he made thousands of Baltic t-shirts with those Latvian, Lithuanian, Estonian flags and with barbed wire around, and I think we still were visible because those shirts were everywhere. And then he also composed a song about the Baltic countries, and that was played too.
Exactly. The important thing to know there was that we're talking about not just a single incident, but we're talking about a period when it was announced that the Soviets were going to be coming to the Olympics, obviously with the other nations, and we got involved in that situation because of the situations that occurred, shooting down the plane, and the opportunity for us to work with other ethnic groups. The point was that up until the time when the Soviets ultimately decided not to come to the Olympics, we continued to get the press and coverage on a constant basis. In fact, we even set up, and thanks to our American friends that worked with us, because they had some fantastic ideas, like David Balsiger with his, what I would call the evangelical group, basically set up things that we set up a campaign to welcome anybody who wanted to flee the Soviet Union when they came here. The Estonian house was set up as a place for people to be able to come to be rescued. A safe house, basically.
Yeah, and we agreed also in Latvian
So
house.
that, right, exactly. And there was so much anti-Soviet activity being covered in the press and media. It was just like, you could have never bought that kind of worldwide coverage. And it was coming to us free because of the stupid reactions, basically, of the Olympic Committee, but also of the Soviet Union, which apparently was falling apart at that time. So that was a big, big win for us at that time. It set the stage for a lot of things to occur later on. And we're very happy with the results of that campaign. And for the University of Vilnius, you have a lot of our actual newspaper articles and materials, and we also have some DVD videos on television that you guys can use in Lithuania.
One comment that goes back to the discussion about the formation of BAFL. And just for an honest historical record, it should be noted that one of the primary reasons for forming BAFL was the fact that there were a small group of Estonian, Latvian, Lithuanians who were very upset with their local ethnic organizations. The Estonians were upset with the Estonian American National Council, and I think Latvians and Lithuanians had some similar feelings. And the upsetness was because the activists here wanted to be more active within the diaspora. And I think as it applied to all three countries, there was a group of people who felt that politics was dirty, the Baltic states were gone, and their role was to try and preserve the culture for Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. And they wouldn't do anything with politics. There was another group that was probably smaller, that felt that there were still opportunities politically to accomplish something to regain independence. And because the national organizations, at least the feeling was that the national organizations weren't doing anything or weren't doing enough, the Baltic American Freedom League was formed. And I mean, from my perspective, they really did do what they set out to do. And by being formed, it generated more activity from the national organizations. So one of the things that hasn't been talked about very much is the impact that BAFL had, not only on American politics, but on the activism of the diaspora and of the national organizations.
At Orwell's 1984 happened another important international thing, Baltic Freedom and Peace Cruise, where participated members of BAFL. So, and tribunal against Soviet Union in Copenhagen, and all those demonstrations and in Helsinki and Copenhagen against Soviet rule in Baltic countries.
And it helped that Joseph Corielis, whose idea this was, his son was working in the Reagan White House.
Lina.
Yeah.
Yes, yes,
So
absolutely.
there was Amy Cleave, she was Reagan's friend, and also she was beauty queen one time.
So for many of us, that was like the golden age during the Reagan administration.
Absolutely. So I'm going to get to the people that are watching us online with some questions for the panel. And then after that, we're going to take a quick break. We've been sitting down together for a couple hours now. And then we'll get back to starting from 1990, which was another major milestone for BAFL. So one of the questions that we have is, what was BAFL's first successes?
Baltic Freedom Day.
The 1982 declaration
Yes.
is the Baltic American Freedom Day resolution.
Okay.
And
That,
not,
I think, was the start and the awakening for many politicians and many nations that had written off the Baltic states as part of the Soviet Union. And I remember that my relative was charged by the Lithuanian American community to watch, especially the printed maps of the world, in which the Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia were designated as part of the Soviet Union Republic. And it was his duty to follow these and totally write objections and based on historical facts, what had happened, and demand that the map, how would you call it, producers, but makers, would actually correct that and make either a notation on the side or just totally, scrap those maps and print out the ones with more historical truth and based with facts.
Yeah.
So this was a big win, I think, and a big undertaking.
And big win was also our visit, like 200 Baltic people in White House.
absolutely.
Yeah, but that was the following year. In 1982, the Reagan administration, the Congress moved that resolution, but the Reagan administration, they did not have the reception, but the following year, in 1983, they not only passed the resolution once again for Baltic Freedom Day. This was also controversial because it was the same day as was always commemorated when the Soviets put Lithuanians, Latvians, and Estonians into cattle cars and shipped them off to Siberia. So we were controversial because it was because of the sacrifice that all of these people had made, that we would stand up for freedom in their memory. And then the Reagan administration had that wonderful reception at the White House. And what happened was that there were over 200 people
Yeah,
there.
my husband was invited, not me.
Oh,
Just to add on to what you said, what the important point was, from the Reagan administration, they said, let us not continuously talk about the tragedies. We now rename this as Baltic Freedom Day, because the goal is the restoration of independence of the three nations. And that was that rang throughout the administration and offered additional opportunities for us to go to Washington, D.C. there. And one final thing, how that connected also with the Olympics is the fact that the Soviet Union is directly protested to the Reagan administration on our demonstrations and things that they considered us to be a threat to their Olympic performers coming to Los Angeles. And the Reagan administration, basically said that we are Americans and have a right as American citizens to peacefully demonstrate in the public square here in the United States, and that was the response of the government. All of these things have worked out fantastically well in terms of our photo. Yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful. I guess the next topic we're going to talk about is, next point is going to be 1990, March 11th, 1990. And in the meantime, while we're having a break, we're going to put in Baltic American Freedom League's visit to the White House. And that'll be playing on while, the panelists are taking a break in the meantime. So we'll play that out for everybody that's watching on YouTube, and we'll get back to discuss from 1990 on. Yes.
It worked out because the president picked that up. Discrimination against all. Well, and discrimination. So, yeah, but the Estonian outrage is coming out. Yes.
Has it been since you've been seeking this meeting?
Sure.
With the caveat that my colleagues will join us in a few moments, I'd like to say that the Lithuanian American Community Incorporated has sought a meeting with the White House since early January. We are the group that supported the Sąjūdis democratic reform movement from its beginning, and now that they are the majority in the Lithuanian government, we saw that there were going to be crises building if the United States did not take an aggressive position, an assertive position to build an international effort to support the new government of Lithuania. We have asked for a meeting since early January. We're very, very pleased that the White House finally agreed to meet with Baltic American leaders. And if you'll indulge me for a moment, we'll wait for the rest of our colleagues to join us.
Here.
Tell us who you are, please.
Tony Mazeika, Baltic American Freedom League, California. Mazeika. Right. Marianne Ricken.
Marianne Ricken with the Estonian American National Council. Where are you from? I am from Arlington, Virginia.
And okay, Oyars.
Oyars Kalins with the American Latvian Association in Rockville, Maryland. It's OJARS KALNINS. Ellen, back a little. Go
ahead.
Okay. We just have a short opening statement by each of us, and I guess I'll go first. I think I am Marianne Ricken with the Estonian American National Council. We were very, very pleased to have Mr. Bush take as much time as he did with us. His staff was trying to get him to leave, but obviously this issue is something that's near and dear to his heart. Mr. Bush had a failure with China. He does not want to see a similar kind of thing happen in the Baltic states. He's very concerned. He wants to find a way out of the Soviet Union for the Baltic states that will not result in a cataclysm for the Soviet Union and that will not result in a bloodbath for the Baltic states. He is very, very worried about what happened in Hungary. He remembers this very clearly from his days, and he kept bringing this up during the meeting. So this is what he is worried about. Our job is to convince him that letting the Baltic states go could be the best thing that would happen to the Soviet Union. This would mean that they would have 4 friendly Finlands on their borders, helping them with glasnost and perestroika, leading to better trade, better openings to the West, and giving them a great deal of benefit for having ended World War II finally and for all. This has been left to fester much too long. We need international support for this international issue of 3 former members of the League of Nations, 3 countries under Soviet military occupation that deserve to have their freedom. These are not Soviet republics. These are nations that need to have their freedom back. Thank you. Tony.
Yes, Tony Mazeika, Baltic American Freedom League. A number of substantial issues were raised with Mr. Bush and with Mr. Baker. Among those were a suggestion on a process for recognition of the Landsbergis government. And we believe there are intermediate steps that can be taken at a de facto level that can generate a momentum where the United States, as well as the Soviet Union and other countries, can ultimately give de jure recognition to the Landsbergis government. There were suggestions that, coming from Mr. Havel from Czechoslovakia, as well as Iceland and Denmark and Norway, a Scandinavian scenario of recommendations and suggestions that negotiations can take place within their countries on the issue of recognition of the Lithuanian Republic. We believe that the President and Mr. Baker are looking for a practical process whereby this can be done. Today is the 1-month anniversary of the existence of the Lithuanian Republic, and this baby is growing and it is existing. The Lithuanian people in Lithuania have stated that independence is non-negotiable and is a fact of reality. We also mentioned this to the President and to Mr. Baker. Each day that the press records ongoing events in Lithuania, each day that Mr. Landsbergis is recognized as being a president by the world community, is one day that becomes easier in this process of getting de jure recognition. We believe, therefore, that it would be in the vital interests of the United States as well as the Soviet Union to establish independent nations on the borders of the Soviet Union. They pose no threat. They, in fact, represent an opportunity to be of benefit to the Soviet Union. The Baltic nations, being formerly independent nations, want to return to their neighbors in Europe and become a process of integration in Europe economically and politically. And we believe ultimately that this will be inevitable.
We've heard these arguments, but what's the change today? Is there any?
I would believe that there seems to be some conciliatory comments coming from Mr. Baker with regards to a process. He mentioned the process several times. He's looking for suggestions on how this may work. And I'm a believer that at the facto level would be a very strong way or a good way to move the process along. The fact that, for instance,
what would constitute de facto recognition?
Again, having meetings at lower levels, having statements being made on the legitimacy of the Landsbergis government, recognizing the legitimacy of the mandate of the Lithuanian people, as well as setting up conversations and discussions at lower levels of our government.
You don't see that happening, though, do you?
We would expect that that may be possible in the near future. We're hoping for that.
You expect that from this meeting?
I cannot say what they will ultimately do, but certainly we had their ears on this.
If I can make one, allow me make just to add to this. I'm with the American Latvian Association, OER's Kalnins. Although we represent American Baltic groups here, all of our organizations have very close ties with the movements in the Baltic states. I just returned from London, where I met with the people who will be constituting the new government in Latvia in 2 weeks. I think one of the significant things that has happened here is that we have now become part of the problem-solving process. We will be continuing meetings with the National Security Council as early as tomorrow, and this is something that hasn't happened until now. I think the Baltic American groups are now being brought into the administration's decision-making process, and I think that will assist a great deal because we have the kind of input of what is taking place over there and what is to be expected over here, over in the Baltic states, that no one has had up until now. And I think if nothing else, this meeting is a start to a very constructive process where we could find a solution from this end that will help over there.
Question for the gentleman with the Lithuanian group. The attitude of the administration up to now has appeared to be that the relationship with the Soviet Union is so vitally important that we dare not upset that or put that in jeopardy by challenging Gorbachev directly, by putting him on the spot on this. Do you think that attitude is changing? Do you think there's any hope? Well, I believe that the president is looking for extension of stability. We believe that the extension of democracy and ultimate recognition of independence of Lithuania will help a process of democratization within the Soviet Union. We believe also that in order to support that democratization, we believe that a message has to be sent that says that we are on the side of those democratic forces within the Soviet Union. I don't know ultimately what the president will do, but certainly we understand his sensitivity. We believe ultimately that the extension of a recognition to the Baltic states are not going to be a threat to Mr. Gorbachev, and he has a way out because those nations were taken illegally by Hitler and Stalin originally in 1939.
What qualitatively different did you hear today from the president and his representatives than you've heard up till now?
Qualitatively, there was not a lot. Quantitatively, there was a lot. This was our first time that they have met with us. We were also assured that they're interested in meeting with our people from Soviet-occupied Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, which to heretofore the White House has not been meeting with these people. In fact, we may have the future president of Estonia waiting outside the gates of the White House right now as we speak, unable to get an appointment. We hope that this changes quickly, and that would be a qualitative change. But the quantity of time he gave us, the sincere concern, looking for arguments, tell me this is not going to mean the end of the world to let the Baltics go. And I think we were able to set his mind at ease that we're not just coming from an emotional appeal, but that we also have information about how bad things are within the Soviet Union as far as the imminent collapse. For us to prop up the Soviet Union—
1 hour.
Over an hour.
What were you about to say?
For U.S. action? I mean,
Certainly.
Sanctions?
Our position was consistent with recommending a recognition and support for the democratic movements. This was the message that the president heard over and over again today. We also intended for him to hear that we wanted to be part of a process of problem solutions, and that is the reason why we feel that we will be back again discussing specific points on how it can happen. One other thing that was also stated at the meeting was the fact, and I believe that there may be some movement on this, is the fact that the press has been prohibited from appearing in Lithuania. And Mr. Baker himself nodded his head and recognized that steps should be taken to get the press back in there so that you people can also be a part of this de facto process by recording the events that are occurring in Lithuania daily, and of course preventing the possibilities of the use of force again against the peaceful population of Lithuania.
You're saying that your groups would be willing to accept de facto recognition rather than formal recognition, something less that you've been asking for?
De facto recognition is one step away from de jure recognition. It is part of a process. First comes de facto recognition of the existence of a legitimate government. Next comes the exchange of diplomatic representatives to that nation. And again, our whole thrust was to find ways at different levels to proceed forward on de facto recognition. And again, I have to say to you, today is the 1-month anniversary of the existence of the legitimate Republic of Lithuania. And the president knows that, and Mr. Gorbachev knows that, and it exists today. And what we're trying to do is extend that existence and to support it and do whatever we can in positive, peaceful terms that will get Lithuania back into the European community, as well as Latvia and Estonia.
You said President Bush kept talking about Hungary and that he didn't want a repeat of Hungary. Why then does that give you optimism?
Well, I think that the president has to maintain, I guess, from his standpoint, a sense of consistency here. And I think that what he's doing is restating his position again. But it does not mean that at other levels of the United States government, other things cannot take place. And I think that ultimately our appearing here today, again, is a recognition of the fact that he's willing to listen and that we do have positive suggestions to make in regards to supporting the United States role in this process.
Do you think it's a mistake to have a summit so soon with Mr. Gorbachev?
No, it's not too soon for Mr. No, it is not too early for Mr. Landsbergis to meet with the Soviet government. He's been asking for those plans are moving on anyway. And I would like to also say that I don't think that either side should look upon the Baltic issue as being a stumbling block to those kinds of meetings. I think that, again, level heads prevailing, the Baltic issue and the restoration of independence is beneficial to both sides because the Baltic states are a special case. They do not represent, for instance, a reason for the dissolution of the Soviet Union. They are part of Europe. They are occupied countries, and they were also the same as Poland, Hungary, and Czechoslovakia. And that is the reason you have unanimity among the Baltic peoples to get back into Europe.
I think there was also a realization.
Way too soon, and Lithuania should take a step back to take two forward.
They will not compromise their legitimacy now as an independent country. It is not too soon. 50 years is almost too late with regards to some of the problems that they are seeing. They are seeing massive ecological problems, massive economic problems, and they have the solutions to those problems themselves. They want to be on their own, and they want to be an asset to Europe and the rest of the world.
I think something that should be realized is that the problems that are taking place in Lithuania today are going to multiply threefold. The Latvians will be declaring independence in 2 weeks. Estonia is in the same process. By the time we get to the summit, we will have a situation in all three republics which is comparable to what is happening today. And that is one issue that the president did seem to be aware of, that what has begun in Lithuania today is going to be a Baltic issue in very short time.
You said it was worked out today that you would meet with the NSC.
Yes, it was.
Administration policy toward the Baltic states in the last month has been right, wrong, on target, off target in what way?
Our position is that we are disappointed with the official policy of the United States by not extending recognition to the Landsbergis government. However, we believe, again, that we can provide for a mechanism here whereby an intermediate step can be taken almost immediately in terms of granting de facto recognition. I think that Mr. Gorbachev was waiting to hear for a response from Mr. Bush when the Landsbergis government redeclared its independence on March the 11th. There was a vacuum that was created, and I think that had the United States come out with a statement of support of the legitimacy of that elective process and redeclaration of independence, I think Mr. Gorbachev would have been a lot more resilient and supportive of this process of granting a recognition to the Landsbergis government to be independent.
Can you comment on your decision on it being worked out today that you would have meetings with the NSC on a regular basis?
to go? Do you think that's symptomatic of the problem that you've had getting in here? Are those the barriers that you've had to overcome?
No, I think here actually we were just dealing strictly with people who knew what his schedule was and were trying to keep him to it, though there may be something to that. We have a lot of very good contacts on the lower and mid levels of the State Department. It's just the White House we haven't been able to penetrate. We used to wear out the threshold here, the previous administration, and this is actually the first time we've set foot in.
Why do you think they're letting you in now?
Well, because things have reached a crucial point, and I think they're realizing their own information may not be sufficient. Perhaps it's time to talk to the people who may have direct information from the scene of the crime, so to speak.
And for both Gorbachev and for the president, the Baltic issue does not go away. It has not gone away for 50 years, and the Lithuanians are prepared for a long-term siege, if necessary, to reestablish their peaceful independence.
So describe the means by which it was set up for regular contact with the National Security Council.
We will be meeting with the National Security Council tomorrow, and at that time we will be discussing how we can regularly be an asset or a part of a process.
Were you told that you would be able to meet with them regularly?
Yes.
We were. Yes, we were.
Did the president tell you he's considering recognition?
No.
The president is maintaining his original posture.
I would add that I think in the Baltic states, this meeting with the National Security Council with Mr. Baker and Mr. Bush is going to be looked upon as a positive sign, as some kind of a signal of support by the mere fact that he is meeting with their representatives here in the United States.
You're saying he maintained his original posture. The gentleman back here says he indicated he would recognize. What is it?
He continues to be, from his standpoint, empathetic and sympathetic to our plight, except that he states that he, of course, has to consider the other agendas, as well as his feeling that there must be a way to support Gorbachev's overall efforts for democratic reform. We also pointed out again, too, that we are believing that democratization and extension of liberty and independence is part of a process to stabilize the world and should not be looked upon as being a threat to the stability of the world.
You told why no TV cameras? Seriously considering de facto recognition, or was this really just a hand-holding session?
No, I can't really ultimately speak for Mr. Baker, but I think that I see that there may be two levels of discussions that were here, the president as well as Mr. Baker, and I think that we will pursue the paths that will be most pragmatic in terms of achieving this goal.
You have no feel for whether or not this administration is seriously considering de facto recognition?
No, we don't have that feel, but the fact that he met with us, the fact that I think we made an impression that this is not strictly some sort of an emotional appeal, but that we have facts to back up our theories, which are that letting the Baltics go does not mean the collapse of the entire empire. I think that had an impact. And I think they like the idea of the 4 Finlands, and that helps the Soviet Union to democratize having 4 friendly countries on their border. But his closing statement comes back to, again, I think Mr. Bush has a very strong sense of having done something wrong in China, perhaps. He said, I am not trying to prop up Gorbachev so that we can sell grain to him. He was very, yes.
Were you told why there were no reporters or TV cameras allowed into the session? Only still.
We didn't think
we didn't raise that issue.
It was a working meeting,
Right.
so that we would anticipate.
And another point was, too, we mentioned the positive leverage that MFN and other trade agreements with the Soviet Union can be utilized as positive leverage in this process. We believe that that represents a very strong position for the president to take in this overall process of recognition.
I would add that several times during the meeting, the president turned to us and said, give me your ideas. He wants some help from us on how to solve this problem. And that seemed to be one of the reasons for the meeting, was to get input from our communities and from our organizations on how to solve what everybody looks upon as a problem.
What I'm going ahead with the summit?
Now I can move.
For the time being, I think it could be useful. Yes.
I think I would address the specific issue of the forceful conscription into the Soviet army of the young Lithuanian boys, and also the abuse that they experienced at the hands of the Soviet army officials in various parts now that they have been taken in the far north. I must say I was very gratified to see that the president was very compassionate, very concerned, and he certainly promised that he will do everything in his power, that there are no more such incidents, and will do everything that he can to interfere in this process. So I think it is a very positive sign.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, let me give you my, I ran out of the Baltic American Freedom League cards. I'll give you my business card anyway. In California.
I get a copy of your title.
Yeah.
You've gotten a lot of
I'm the president, so
nice words from Bush today, but no firm commitments. If he doesn't, if you don't get action over the next month or so, the sort that you want, what do you do then? Do you?
Well, I think it's a very positive step to begin with that he met with us. This is something we have not been able to achieve. We were turned down many times.
Meeting this group also is a message to the Soviets, because of our connections also with the Republic of Lithuania and with people in Estonia and Latvia, and that's something that the Russians are also going to make note of.
But obviously, I got a copy to stay. Right?
You did no. This is a copy of the letter of the young Americans who are in Lithuania right now, and they have addressed it to the president.
Yeah. What happens next? I mean, if obviously the president.
Let me just ask you why you had a different impression of Mr. Bush's reaction on the question of recognition. You said that you talked with President Mr. Landsbergis last night. Can you explain that?
I spoke with President Landsbergis last night, and President Landsbergis asked me to appeal.
Okay, so if you're on YouTube plan and Facebook plan, you're watching, this was a C-SPAN post.
President Bush explained that it's rather difficult to recognize government which does not have control of that territory.
With President
However,
Bush on April
I
11,
mentioned that in 1918, when Czechoslovakia declared independence and the government of President Mazeika did not have control of the territory, the United States was the first country which recognized Czechoslovakian government.
Background. So you can definitely see the full, 20-minute in there. So My question to the panel is, where were we at this point, and what led to the meeting with President Bush on April 11th, 1990?
Well, I can start off by saying I was one of those that was in Washington at that time. We had a meeting with President Bush, as you can see as a result of this video, through the courtesy of Marianne Ricken, Estonian, in Washington, D.C. She contacted us because she had been able to set up a request to actually meet with President Bush, and a meeting was specifically set up for members of the Latvian, Estonian, and Lithuanian communities to meet with President Bush to discuss the current situation at that time in Lithuania. All of our organization at that time, among others, were pressing the United States at that time to immediately recognize the Landsbergis free government of Lithuania. And we were not receiving a positive response at that point. However, as a result of pressure from various levels, the President Bush set up a private meeting with our community, with our organization, to discuss the issues at that time with regards to what we were trying to achieve insofar as getting U.S. official recognition of the Landsbergis government, and see what the response would be from the president and his administration. So that was the initial idea.
I would like to make a correction of your narrative, because I was very much involved with Marianne Ricken at that time, who was Kellan later on. Marianne called me.
Good.
And she said, let's set up the strategic outlay of this particular meeting. And so she and I both decided that all of the organizations, normally the presidents of those organizations of the ethnic groups of Lithuanians, Latvians, and Estonians would be called upon. And generally what would happen is that we would have like a photo op and then be done with it. But the consensus that Marianne and I came up with was that strategically, we need to have somebody that's going to argue the case for freedom for Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia. So she took on the Estonians as far as who was going to be coming into this meeting. And I know that Jaak was part of this meeting, President Bush, and Simonson, and there were two others. Marianne Ricken Kellan was in that meeting. For the Lithuanians, we had Rima Mazeika, Angele, Nelsas. We made the request of the Lithuanian ICAS organization to have Viktoras Nakas come in and argue for Lithuania, for that organization. And as far as the Lithuanian community, Valdis, who was in charge of it, he did agree to have Asta Banionis argue for the Regione. And that was very well represented as well. And then for the Latvians, it was Agnes, was it Agnes Pavlovskis or Olgers? Agnes, yes. Agnes was in that group, and you can probably tell me more of the individuals from the Latvian group. But the whole case was that to argue for the Baltics, and the presidents who normally would be very, welcome to come have a meeting with the President of the United States, they agreed to step aside because this was so important, and it was exactly a month after the March 11th proclamation of independence for Lithuania. So with that said, there was a meetup with this entire group. You folks were there, three. Valdis, were you there as well? You were in Washington in this meeting?
No.
Yeah.
I was
In the meeting as well.
In the meeting as well, yes, yes.
Yes.
That was a bad meeting.
Well, it turned out
Be a good meeting.
eventually okay,
Yeah.
because of all, what the arguments that were brought forward. And then plus we had, on that same day, we had demonstrations on the West Coast against Rosmov speaking at UC San Diego. So national news was, all of these groups pushing for the common cause, freedom for the Iraqis.
But what's important to say is that we all got together as a group, and we sat down and hammered out a proclamation and declaration of what we were expecting to receive from the president and his administration when we met in the White House. It was all carefully prepared and it covered all the points with regards to, first of all, condemnation of what the Soviets were doing in the Baltic countries, especially Lithuania at that time because of the big pressure. Also, what we were expecting from the United States Bush administration at that point, because we were looking for legal representation and recognition of the Landsbergis government. And now that's a little bit different from the fact that historically and until that time, the United States government never recognized the illegal and forcible occupation of the 3 Baltic countries. But what we were talking about was strictly a recognition and a recognition of the sovereignty of Lithuania from the United States government. So we spent quite a bit of time at that meeting, and we have documentation of it from that meeting. I received a personal letter from President Bush several days later, and I have a copy of that to share, where he personally, but privately indicated that he was in favor of the restoration of the Baltic countries, but because of the fact that the United States was involved in the Afghanistan war, that they were looking at the security situation and also the interest of the United States at that point. But his letter pointed out that we would have continuing discussions with the administration. So from that standpoint, even though we did not get recognition for the Landsbergis government that day, we knew that it would be coming soon. And we continued to pressure based on those points.
There was the Landsbergis, the Lithuanian situation was a key point in the meeting, but the general outline of the meeting was putting forward the position of the Baltic states that they should all regain their independence, and there was a preliminary meeting the night before the meeting with Bush, and there had been an agreement that we would present an opening statement to Bush. And actually, when we say Bush, it was an amazing group there. The only cabinet member not there was Dan Quayle, the vice president. Had Secretary of State Baker and every other member of the cabinet was in that Roosevelt room that we met in at the White House. But BAFL was presented one possible opening statement, which I wrote, and I think it was Jay Banker, the other side, prepared a statement. Theirs was much milder. Mine was, I remember flying to Washington, Tony and I sat next to each other, and we were going through the draft that I prepared, which was pretty harsh. But then with Tony getting into it, it became even harsher. And the problem was, I mean, in political terms, not political, in terms of international relations and where Bush was coming from, Bush really didn't want to see the breakup of the Soviet Union because of geopolitical reasons. He was afraid that once the Soviet Union broke up, there would be, a dozen different ethnic conflicts would take place. And he thought it would just be a total mess. You know, and we didn't think so, but the letter we presented was pretty harsh. The consensus of the group meeting the night before was that almost everybody wanted to go with the milder version. And in retrospect, it was probably just as well, because the meeting did go smoothly. You know, the feedback was that the Bush people were happy with the way the meeting went. I think it was originally scheduled for half an hour or 20 minutes or something, and we went about an hour, if I remember right. Exactly. So we got much more time with them than we anticipated. The other part of that Washington trip that no one has mentioned yet is that the next day some of us met with Connie Rice, who was, what was she in?
Advisor, yeah.
She was with the National Security Council, I think, in charge of the East European or
very much
Baltics came into that area.
She was very much involved in the Baltic states.
Yeah.
As we
well, she was also a Soviet expert.
Exactly.
But anyway, we had a one-on-one meeting with her that nobody had scripted for, and it was really give and take. That I think was a useful.
Yes, it was.
Maybe, well, I can't say more useful than Bush's, but it had genuine value also.
But as Jack is pointing out, the importance of the meeting, but the thing was the reaction, our press conference with the press and the media, which is on video, you can see basically how enthusiastic and how responsive the entire press corps was with regards to what it is that we're going to accomplish for the Baltic nations, which was also fantastic because that was worldwide.
Angele, so what was your take on the meeting?
Somewhat different, I think. I had been this whole idea. As always, excuse my voice, I talk like John Kennedy. My voice is bad. I had been working in Washington, lobbying and living with my daughter on weekends in New Jersey. And they would drive me to Washington where they had rented a condominium and, placed me there. So they met with my daughter's father-in-law, and my husband met them. They had a couple of drinks and they decided to go and try and rescue Lithuania. So he said, I will rent an apartment and you get your wife, buy a computer and let her go. And that's how my, stay in Washington was. So I had been already talking on other issues and lobbying. I know, and I tried to get a meeting with President Bush. At the time, the Afghanistan was raging on, and there were many Lithuanians, young men, who were taken by the Soviet Union and treated as Soviet soldiers. Now, we decided that this was not true. They were not built on their own, serving in the army, that they were conscripted, and that the Baltic states were occupied, and they should be given over to the Red Cross and treated as differently than Soviet soldiers. So this was my mission, and I would prepare and work with many other senators and trying to find some help on this issue. And, was exhausted. They picked me up, took me back to New Jersey, where they absolutely took away the telephone. They said, it's enough for you. You will pass away and not help us with the kids. And,
grandkids.
And with the grandkids, you got to stay. And, they finally, I talked to the, chief of staff, and they promised that they would give me the meeting, but to wait and be patient and everything. And he said, we probably can't promise you anything, but sometime beginning of May. I said, oh, fine, that's great. And he was shocked. That was a big blow. And so I was picked up, taken to New Jersey, and there, and my father's mother-in-law comes on, and she said, I'm going to give you a phone call. The lady is on the line, and she says, Angele, they're looking for you in Washington, in the president's office. We had a meeting. And then that's when I raced to Washington, and of course, as I said, Tony said many things and already told you a great deal about what had happened. And it was a consensus, and the memorandum was, composed and agreed. And the meeting was in the Roosevelt room, like Tony has said. It just so happened that I sat directly from President Bush. And I had no love for him to begin with, so I wasn't all that excited. Nothing romantic at all. I had that mission. And the meeting started. It was very nice, and we talked to many others. Tony already covered it, so I won't go over it with my raspy voice. And then finally came my turn. And so I addressed Mr. President. Told him that there are many young men, Ukrainians, and perhaps even Latvians or Estonians. I don't have the real count for you, but these young men were not, part of the Soviet army. They were conscripts, and that they should be given over not to the Soviet Union when taken into, custody in the fighting, but giving over to the Red Cross. So he was, started doing this and that. Everybody looked up, and all of a sudden he looks, there was a big thing, map of like, and he said, Angela, I am very compassionate to you as a mother for, to understand and fight for these young men. But actually, I have to look at this broader map and think of my friend Gorbachev. Before I knew what was I doing, I said, Mr. President, I don't agree with you. And everybody kind of jumped. I thought it was going to, whack me over the head. It was a scandal. I should not have said. And the Secretary of State Baker, was sitting next to me. And during the meeting, when President Bush talked, I kept taking little notes on my little pad. And Vice President Baker kept looking over my shoulder and trying to read what I wrote down. Finally, he said, Angela, this is not right. Would you mind meeting me after the meeting? Once we leave the meeting with the president and share your notes with me. I said it would be an honor, Mr. Vice President, Mr. Baker. So, many people, we walked out of the hallway, and sure enough, he stood by my side and insisted that I give you my notebook. So I had no other, to act properly. And I looked at him, I had to read, but I said, this is not the right thing. There are many other issues. He said, well, good then, why don't you come to Mr. K's restaurant and you can tell me more about it. Mr. K's was not the golden place. I thought that money. But I said, very, very well, Mr. Baker. So, I gave him the notebook, and we did go to the Mr. K's restaurant, and he came in with his family. And he walked over to me, gave back my little notebook, and he thanked me, and he says, well, to get in touch with me, there are other issues. And then he laughed, he said, but now I have to go to my family, we're kind of like the Brady Bunch. And he told me about, his, he had his divorce, and he took twice, and he just, turned the whole family together, and pretty much kids and everybody. There were 6 about them. And then we parted on a very nice, friendly basis. And it was kind of that, I don't know what he did with the notes or what the consensus was. I never met him again. And I had seen him in a couple of places in the capital. And then, of course, I worked with the Baltic and the Baltic office and had other issues.
And we'll get onto that.
Then had an agreement from the vice president, and then he could go and get access to some of the archives and regard to the Baltic states and what happened in some of the historical facts.
Okay.
So I said he could stay with us, and he did, and that was to tell you a lot more about it.
Cool.
But just as a postscript to the situation, a couple of things here. It was a tremendous amount of positive response when we went public with the press conference with Tim, which was worldwide. And our efforts did not end at that time, but continued forward every day during that period of time because there was the crisis going on in Lietuva at that point. And also the personal message coming back privately from the President of the United States, which pointed in a direction that ultimately the government was going to recognize the last spread of this government.
So what was BAFL's activities, when January 13th, 1991, when the tanks rolled in, Alpha rolled into Vilnius, what was BAFL doing on that point?
Some of us were pretty active. In fact, we had opportunities to be on radio and on television, and we did have certain radio programs in the evening that spent an hour or so talking to us. We even had set up one important radio network out of Los Angeles to personally interview Landsbergis while the tanks were outside. This was live for the American people to hear on the radio what was going on outside at that period of time. Overall, the American public was extremely positive and favorable towards our countries. So I think that is what I wanted to project here, that the American public very much was on the side of Baltic independence.
On the evening of January the 12th, we got word of what had happened in Lithuania, which was already January 13th of 1991. And all of the communities descended upon St. Casimir's Church here in Los Angeles, and all of the Baltic communities came together, and we all had rallies that were carried on the news that everybody had to double down and to make sure that we would not give up in any way, shape, or form. And then there was all sorts of plans that were made because Mr. Gorbachev, actually, he and his wife came out to California, and he also, visited President Bush at the time and in Washington, D.C. And so we had a wonderful plan to greet them, and with an airplane flying by saying, "Gorby, free the Baltics." Especially when his wife, Raisa Gorbachev, when she was visiting the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco, we had a bunch of costume Baltic dancers that were beautiful, that were waving to them coming by. And then the airplane flew across saying, "Gorby, free the Baltics." And then at the time when he was going to visit the Soviet consulate up in San Francisco, what happened was that we would have these giant balloons that would raise the Lithuanian, Latvian, and Estonian flags above the consulate, the Soviet consulate in San Francisco. And we had these huge World War II lights that would have that would be searching for airplanes, and we would spot them, so we would make sure that he could actually see Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia's colors from the consulate. And then the next day, when he was going to have a meeting with the Stanford University president and Cranston and various other politicians up in NorCal, the Lithuanians, Latvians, Estonians had gone up there in buses. There's one particular Latvian.
There were 3 Armenian buses, and then it
Yeah. And then what happened was, we had 150 yards of Lithuanian flag.
and also Estonia.
No, this was when he was going to Stanford.
Yeah.
And so what
Okay, that's
happened
good.
was, we
I
asked
don't know
all,
it.
yeah, we asked all
Oh, you
the
were-
Americans.
Yeah.
We have a special honor for Mr. Gorbachev. Would you mind holding this flag? And so when Mr. Gorbachev and his limousines came driving in, 150 yards, which is 3 times 150 is 450 feet, of Lithuanian flag was right there. And you should have seen his face when he saw what he drove into. Because we got him the message that we're not giving up. So,
But Inguna wanted to say about the flag, the Latvian flag.
No, we had like the 3 Jewish guys, Ari Gold and his brother, and my daughter was on my shoulder. She was year and a half old, and those guys, they were helping to hold Estonia and Latvia those long flags.
yeah.
And they still remember, and they went to Latvia now and made movie and
That's fantastic.
I have many recorded and CDs and DVDs that were chosen to respond after the President's State of the Union address. I talked every day from Washington about my activities on KPLA. I also secured 12 editorials on behalf of Lithuania and the Baltic states in the Orange County Register, which is about 3 million readers or subscribers. And I was in that newspaper, and it was included as the basis for freedom, which really was unbelievable, incredible. But the only thing it wasn't me, but it was the idea, and it was the freedom of the Baltic states and Lithuania. And I received a letter from President Adamkus when he was here. And I remember I organized a meeting with the BAFL board for him. Yeah, he was very happy to meet with the board members and send me a letter on it. So there were all kinds of, we organized a demonstration in front of the embassy for of Germany and addressing the Molotov attack. And I think this decidedly working very much with other nationalities of the Catholic nation. And reminded me the community, the minority council, and we had, you know, a kind of an extended possibility to represent bigger, you know, membership for American citizens, also relative to the freedom as well as the other minorities in the Baltic states. And I started working with the Polish community and the Polish county. Excuse me, my voice is feeling out.
So Dorothy, you wanted to say something also?
It all turned out well. On behalf of the Baltic American Freedom League, I was happy you were talking about you know, the attack of the Soviet tanks on the parliament. And I immediately notified the American radio and TV station. And then I had the honor to go with our certificate. I had the honor to go to Lithuania and meet with the families of those who were killed as a fireman defending it. And give each one a high certificate from BAFL, which they were very grateful. But the thing that really, I think, saved our homelands in their way was an amazing thing of the Baltic way, as well as was the ability to connect and represent not one country, but the Baltic states. This was a big power of ours. And many of these things, you think that you will always forget everything, but you know, as the time runs, all of these issues keep compounding, and your years advance, you find yourself forgetting documents, films, and here probably some in the White House. Sometimes twice in the Oval Office. And he was aware, very sympathetic. Mr. Valdis and his wife with President Reagan to thank him. Also, the nun that President Reagan agreed to meet with in Moscow when he visited there, and he met several dissidents in the American embassy. So I was able to also beg her to meet with him. He was so gracious, so humble, what a great human being he was, very compassionate with the Baltic States. And it's just that the time is still going on. I'm still pretty active yet in some issues.
Yes, Tony, you have a comment, Tony?
Well, the point of us being here today, understanding how active the communities were at that time, specifically were very, very tangible projects. Baltic American Freedom League at that time totally committed. What for me personally, somehow we would hope to be able to translate the activities of our people at that time somehow with our current communities, especially the young people, that they would not only understand what is going on there, but also become active in the political area. Because Baltic American Freedom League, among organizations, is probably one of the only organizations that's totally committed to be working for the sovereignty and freedom of the Baltic countries at the level where we are, dealing directly government to government, American citizens to the American government, as opposed to organizations that are totally committed to culture, language, and schooling. And I believe that basically the communities should also recognize that beyond the activities of BAFL, that those organizations should do things to inculcate a sense of patriotism among the young children and people to get involved, because governments only are created through the willingness of the people where they live. And if you don't do it, somebody else will do it. And sometimes it turns out to be very negative in terms of your activities. But anyway, our whole hope somehow is to translate all this sense of energy that was shown at that time to get our organizations involved here on a nationwide basis.
Oh, yeah, I have one other issue before I told you. And that is how to integrate immigrants into some of the political work. The great organizing meetings by the oceans, all cultural events, but not many get involved to contact your congressman or your senator or do something politically. It's almost like very blank subject to approach with them. What is it that we could do to get them more involved, because they're so many. And as far as I know, to tell you to many times. I even thought being in the war between and the other the chair of the committee is that there are not any other such political item that I organized in the U.S. Congress to organizing a group, call it caucus or something else, minus the caucus. In other countries, it may be called something else. Many Balts living in different countries. Certainly, there could be a few people sufficient enough willing to go and fight for these homelands and be closer and get somehow to those nations, rulers or Congress or Parliament or President. Somehow nobody really paid much attention on other relevant days. And we were able to do very significant wins in that area.
Absolutely. So I'm gonna call Lina to talk about post 1991 activities. She's not a member of our board, but thank you for joining us all the way from Vilnius University.
Thank you very much for inviting, and it's an honor to listen to first source of information about the organization that carried out activities for 45 years this year. So this is an anniversary to mention to everyone. So as I believe, the interesting part that we would like to get to my input here is my personal story in connection to American organizations that helped Lithuania in the early 90s. And I was a student of English language in Vilnius University. I'm an alumni, and as a student speaking some English, we were invited to be helpers to one particular initiative that was called Central and Eastern European Legal Initiative, which was part of the Central European Network. And in Lithuania, it was established under the very under leadership by Ernestas Raskauskas, who is the lawyer in DC and who was very also engaged in campaigning for Lithuania and helping Lithuanians when they get in trouble doing the campaigning and for Lithuania. So he was the one who came in the 90s, and this Sealy was organizing the activities for Lithuania to get the rule of law and to create the constitution, to make the constitution. And it was the period when we were out of wars in general. The country was out of the Soviet Union. The transformation was really, really difficult. The country was really lucky to have absolutely gorgeous leadership that were very straightforward, oriented to the Western culture and law and economy in general. So this help from the United States with diaspora, with very professional people was absolutely immense. So Ernestas Raskauskas organized a working group together with the government as well as the Supreme Court in DC, who were organizing and creating the constitution for Lithuania. And in Lithuania, they organized multiple events, getting lawyers from the United States to come and have conferences to share the organization, to share the practice and best practice and know-how. And thanks to the people like Raskauskas and the different initiatives like Sealy, and then thanks to US government money that was also well directed to the Baltics through USAID as a helping organization. Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, we've got the Baltic Enterprise Fund. I don't know how much you know about it, but that's US government money for the Baltics to transform into a market economy, to have financial instruments to make country run for really financially independent. So that was my another job when I was working there for more than a decade when they were introducing the financial instruments through Baltic American Enterprise Fund. So this organization was mainly creating our financial system that exists now. And it was really successful because I left Lithuania around and Latvia and Estonia about 2010 by selling all the financial instruments to other banks and getting money back, all of it. So the Baltics don't owe anything to the government because they managed to actually be quite transparent and clear with money. And in the 90s, that was not a very common thing in general. In the 90s, lots of different money just disappeared. And then this particular program was really successful. And that organization now is known as Baltic American Freedom Foundation, and it's transformed into help in scholarships and all different know-how exchange through different political sciences mainly. But at that time, it was a big transformational tool. That my little experience through with American organizations and American governmental money helping the Baltics to roll into a new stage of the development in the 90s when it was really difficult. And as I mentioned, the leadership of government, all governments of the Baltics was very important because it was absolutely very strictly towards the West. And the Baltic Way, you mentioned the Baltic Way, if you remember 1989. I don't know if you noticed, but we were standing, showing our backs to the east and facing the west, and that was very intentional for all the people to know that. Well, it was easy because it was from the south to the north, but it was the choice of the direction, nothing else. So that's that. But that was very symbolic. That was actually very straightforward that you would go. And then during that particular day, the whole chain of people made a step towards the west. So that later, was followed by organizations who came and helped. So that may be a short story, not in a little introduction. If there are questions about it, I'm here to answer. But that's my personal experience in particular programs that have connection to BAFL in this sense.
Question.
Yeah.
Question. Well, I'm in contact with Lithuania and many politicians and parliamentary members and business organizations. That's what I still very much about. And it bothers me that now I hear voices that there's actually hate and rhetoric against the President of the United States.
Okay.
And yet we depend on the United States, and also many of our efforts, we certainly help for the Baltic states and Lithuania to access the sent to NATO. And, whenever we also live in America, and this is our second homeland that accepted us, and some loyalty has to go some way. So when he needed NATO countries to come and give him a hand, they absolutely rebuffed him and refused. And news coming that Lithuanians hate the President of the United States does not really serve Lithuania, nor the interests, nor really any assistance and security from America, because whether we like him or don't like him, he's the most powerful person in the world still. And
but I think I'm sorry to interrupt, but it's not really true, and I don't agree.
That's what I hear. They hate Trump,
but this is a gossip. It's not the real story. There's lots of different opinions.
Right.
Lithuania has a democracy, and people share lots of things.
I was invited to a radio program in Lithuania, and at that time they asked me, "So, Mrs. Duseviciene, what are you going to do? What's going to happen when Barack Obama gets elected?" And I said, it's going to be tragic not only for the United States, but also for Lithuania. They never invited me to another program or discussion.
Yeah.
So about 10 minutes and let's
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for us to achieve anything here by dashing.
Angela, one of the reasons that BAFL has been so successful is that they've been able to bring in Democrats and Republicans, and they haven't gotten into these issues that you're bringing up now.
And I talked to all of them, Democrats.
Yeah. It's how you talk to them that is the problem. So
Yes.
let's keep the discussion apolitical, except when it relates to the Baltic states directly. And later on, I can have a cup of coffee with you and discuss
Okay, that's
your
okay.
thoughts.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So,
Just believe it, okay? Believe
yeah.
it.
Just,
Believe it.
I have, I don't know if I had a question here, but I know that in Ukraine, the participation in all international organizations is a massive priority, and then the cooperation with all the countries is a massive priority. So they balance the diplomacy well to this particular moment quite well.
Very good. Just on a positive note, they wanted to say basically that we have our caucus in Congress and in the Senate is growing, and it's a bipartisan organization. And we are looking at the long-term relationship with the United States in Congress. And some of the issues that are being raised here are being addressed even in Washington and Congress and Senate right now, dealing with that situation. But there will be continued support for the Baltic nations from the United States.
yeah, so question from the live stream is, I'm going to pull it up, and I'm going to answer this question and kind of wrap it up. But before we do, just want to thank every panelist for joining us today. I think further, I think working with Urten, and I think if we could have a post meeting about this and have more in-depth discussion, because I think we talked a lot in 2 hours and 20 minutes, but I think it doesn't show everything that we've done with BAFL. So just wanted to thank you all. Thank you for coming from all the way from Vilnius. Lina, Urte. Thank you, Valdis, Angele, Jak, Tony, and Danuta for joining us. I want to thank our the group that helped set this up, August Blakis and Kate Blakis, and I know Christina Kozlowska's also helped out. So it was this is kind of very informal, event that we've kind of had, a little bit more free for all. We do have a BAFL event banquet coming up this fall, so stay tuned for that. And I just want to thank everybody for attending today, and I'm just going to close it up. So the final question was, what is next for BAFL, and how can Balts around the United States and world assist with its efforts? So the thing is this: we are a nonprofit organization, 501c3. So we don't pick political sides. We just discuss policy. We're here to educate the public, the grassroots, Congress, the State Department. So we are 100% volunteers. The only person that we have is an advisor that goes to DC. She's professional, and she meets up with Congress and sets up meetings with staff. And so every donation that's submitted to BAFL, it helps us continue the cause. So you can become a donor and become a member by donating to BAFL on our website through PayPal. Or you can also, if you're short on funds, you can help volunteer with us. And the most minimal thing you can do to help our cause is going onto our website, going to the call to action, filling out this message to your congressman and your 2 senators and possibly the president, depending on which campaign we're working on. And that message will go straight to those representatives. And what's great about it is we see who's receiving it in Congress. And then we set up meetings with them to discuss the Baltics, to discuss supporting Ukraine. So in our future, in continuous efforts, is that we continue on that. So those are 3 ways you can help Baltic American Freedom League succeed in the goal of defending the Baltics and continuing Baltic and American interests in the region. So I want to thank you all for joining us on the live stream, and we'll have more of this to come, and I'll see you all later. Thank you very much.
I know that I have been invited to the Mar-a-Lago and also